I think that's the Kapampangan mindset. Yung sinasabi kong Kapampangan flair. You give him something, whether it's a dish or a recipe, paano pa kaya mapapasarap to?
If there's something Pampanga is best known for, it's their rich culinary heritage. Kapampangans take their food seriously. It's a form of art that is fully expressed in their everyday. The province has given us some of the most passionate artists, cultural advocates, and culinarians. Perhaps amongst the most influential of them is Cloud Tayag. Cloud is a chef, artist, writer, and Filipino culinary heritage advocate who continues to tell stories of the Kapapangans and Filipinos through his work. This is a glimpse into his mind, told in chapters, and why he thinks a person's story is the key ingredient that can make a dish delicious.
Dito ako bumibili ng pandesal. By 8 a.m. ubos na. Kaya dapat maaga ka dito, yung bagong luto. Atlong tray pandesal. So, atlong supot na yun. Sige, 15. Nagpagawa na ako ng chocolate de baterol. Ito yung original Dunkin pandesal. So, sinasawsaw na thick chocolate na gano'n. Ito yung hometown flavors na sinasabi ko na dito lang sa bahay, sa Pampanga. My real name is Claudio. I am the 9th of 12 children. Since I was small, they called me Cloud9. So it's Cloud, it's not Claude. Apin ng bangus ko yan? Sige na, kumain kami ito. Oh, ito yung masantig na. Tsura yan. Newly popped pitichan. There are certain foods that brings back memories, or why you like certain foods, or why you dislike certain foods. We eat by association. As early as I can remember, like weekends, my uncle would fetch us to play with this only child. So every morning, nandun sa outdoor ko, uupo kami sa bangko facing the lola. She will hand feed us. Paksiw na bangus, a little sinangag, tapos merong isang bit ng chicharon, ng pitichan. Tapos sasaw-saw yun sa toyo. Tapos isang subo. The thing is, we were all like anticipating for the tiyan ng bangus. And then we would play Jack and Poy, who will get the eyes of the bangus. So that is my fondest, most memorable. I would say, para bang foresee the future Cloud. Na as the, I will not say gourmet, but the gourmand. Kami Tayag kasi meron kaming reputation here in Pampanga na I will not say matakaw, but mahilig kumain, masarap magluto. I would say what makes us Kapampangan is the joie de vivre nung Kapampangan and the flair. Or our elder siblings were already in UP Diliman. They will come home on weekends. Tapos kasama pa yung buong frat, literally. Kaya yung nanay ko, paluto ng paluto. Doon kami nasanay sa the exposure of us children. Like, if you want something, aside from what I cook, sabi ng nanay namin, you do it yourself. I think for me, that was the life lesson. Until we grew older, na if you want something, you work for it. I think in a way that formed me as an artist. Our mother provided us with this guitar watercolor set. Siguro at that time, piso lang yun eh. That was the cheapest thing na ako. So, kaya akong walang takot sa watercolor. Basta pinta ako ng pinta, tapos any paper. So, growing up, I thought like painting was child's play. Until, when I was 12 years old, my father, the best friend niya the late Abe Cruz. Abe was a painter and a writer. The thing was, sinama ni Tito Abe yung mga kaibigan niya ng mga painters. They painted in the countryside. I was 12 years old. For the first time in my life, I saw adults painting, which I thought was just child's play. Doon ang aking eureka moment na that's what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, for me, that defined me. 12 years old. So, still in elementary and then high school, ako yung palaging na-assign to draw a chart or illustration on the board. Several of my classmates would literally bribe me to do their project for them. Ang kabayaran, alam mo, ano? Yung recess, nila, budget. Pwede palang pagperahan to, pagkitaan. Yeah. So, when I was in fourth year high school, I wanted to take up fine arts. Then when my father learned of it, sabi, no, you have to take something more concrete, professional, sabi niya. So I applied for architecture sa UP, which luckily I was accepted. So, wabot ako ng 3-4 years doon, architecture, but then I realized, parang, lalo na may engineering, I wanted to drop out. Sabi ng tatay ko, hindi pwede. Tingnan mo yung mga kuya mo, dalawa lawyers, yung isa businessman, yung ganito, yung isa ganyan-ganyan, no? I had to finish something. Just show me, take up anything, show me a diploma, then you're free to bahala ka sa buhay mo. Something like that. So, but he already knew that I could paint. On weekends, Saturday especially, I used to visit si Mang Abe and show him my work. Tapos kikritik niya, ito dapat ganyan-ganyan, or magde-demo siya, ganon-ganon. And then, yung nakita na rin yung progress ng aking kwan, subukan mo nga mag-consign ka kay Larry sa ABC Galleries. So, nag-consign akong 2 watercolor ng Baguio scene. Aba, within a week na benta kagad, by a foreigner pa. It was very encouraging for a fledgling artist. Sabi ni Mang Abe, schedule mo na si Cloud ng 1-man show. So by November, just a few months later, naka-exhibit ako, yun ang ABC Galleries na to. So I was already doing the Santos series at that time. And Ati-Atihan, Philippine Fiestas. So even from the start, ang aking thematic is like always Philippine, local. And that extended to my food. 1988, Larry invited me as a guest cook doon sa one of his restaurants called Anghang. And he titled it Art Walks by Cloud Tayag. The thing was, I interpreted my paintings into edible art. So there was another event, my realization that cooking could be another art form. Don't they call it culinary arts in the first place, cooking? So this was, again, I joined the Saturday artist group. So gagawa ka ng still life, magdo-drawing, na ganon-ganon. I was lost in my thought na parang nawala ako dun sa room. Iniisip ko, paano ko kaya lulutuin yan? And then how do I plate it? What do I mix it? That was, again, the realization na I am beyond the drawing. It was a series of invitations doing this and that. I guess that's how I earned my title chef. Nakilala ako as the cooking artist. Diba later on, tinawag na akong chef nung mag-uso na yung mga chefing. And then year 2000, the lifestyle editor of Philippine Star, Bilet Manangkil, she gave me a column. Thursdays ang binigay niya sa akin, Thursday column, on food and travel. Yun ang first time kong sumulat ng year 2000. So by 2005, na-compile ko yung aking articles that was printed into a book 2007, Food Tour, with my drawings and recipes. So that was my first 3-in-1 book as a writer, as a chef, and as an artist with my drawings. nakilala ako sa pagsusulat sa food. Naiimbita ako ngayon sa mga food promotions ng mga different hotels or restaurants. The thing was, simultaneous with that, year 2000, Intercon invited me to be a guest chef, the first Filipino to guest in the Prince Albert, which is a French restaurant. So that was the first time that I introduced to the public yung aking seafood kare-kare. And the sauce. Kasi to recreate that rich peanut-based sauce without the collagen of the oxtail. Kasi ang secret ng sauce ng kare-kare would be the broth of the meat. Ito seafood eh. I have to recreate that. So using coconut milk, tapos the real peanuts, and then of course the atsuete, and then ginigisa ko sa bagoong. And then of course I simplified the vegetable sides, sitaw, the yard-long beans, but I braided it. I would like to think I started that. Very momentous yung 2000 na yan. That was the first time we opened Ballet Dutong to private dining. I have envisioned this Ballet Dutong basically as my painting studio and workshop. Doon ko ginagawa yung aking mga sculptures, mga ganito, kung ano-ano ang aking artistic activity. And the silong, as it is now, was basically a display area for my artwork. So, while in UP, freshman ako, on long weekends, pag merong long weekend na ganyan, kakantsawin ako ng mga classmate ko. Cloud, papunta kami ng Baguio this long weekend. Daan kami sa inyo, paghanda mo kami. Sure, sabi kong gano'n. Okay, maganda ka ng tosino, gawa ka ng sisig, tsaka yung buro hitong mustasa. Another realization, when they told me that, mabuti ka pa, may inuuwi yan. They end with my lifestyle here. So that's when I realized na how lucky I was to be born in this family in Pampanga. And doon ko na-realize din, for them, Pampanga food, our everyday food was special. It is like just affirming the culinary capital title. It's not a self-crowned title. It was written about by non-Kapampangan writers since the 60s, 70s, 80s. So, I think that's the Kapampangan mindset. Yung sinasabi kong Kapampangan flair, you give him something, whether it's a dish or a recipe, paano pa kaya mapapasarap to? I think it's yung sinulat ni Brother Andrew Gonzalez, it's the confluence of affluence. I think for me, the quintessential Kapampangan dish would be the buro, hito, mustasa. I mean, it's a set. You cannot have one without the other. Starting with the fish, it will be the freshwater fishes. So it could be the hito, catfish, mudfish or dalag, bangus, tilapia. These are the most common freshwater fishes. Since Pampanga is basically landlocked, so we have access to the sea from the river. It flows out to the brooks and then mga sapa-sapa nga, leading out to the Manila Bay. So we don't really have a sea coast in the sense that we don't get seafood nung araw. Kaya the Kapampangans, they lived off from their immediate surrounding. Lalabas lang sa paligid, makakakuha sila ng palaka, ng mga hito, mga mudfish. So, in times of plenty, anong ginagawa nila? Yung mga isda na yan, binuburo with the kanin, tapos either burong isda, any of those fishes, or hipon. Tapos nun, hindi ko alam paano naging set. Why the mustasa? Dito lang kinakain na as a salad, meaning raw. Ang mustasa kasi ginagamit din sa sinigang sa miso. But then, naluto yun, no? Pero ito, mustasa sa leaf, and it could be boiled ang palaya and okra or eggplant, kung anong meron. Pero para sa akin, yung mustasa talaga, because it has like a bitter, spicy end to it. May pagka-wasabi. Kapampangan buro roll, ang mustasa. This is comfort food for us Kapampangan. Yun ang kinagisnan namin. Kung Kapampangan, yun ang palaging hinahanap. Why the Kapampangan panlasa? No, matindi yung ano namin, hinahanap nila yung dapat malinamnam, malasa siya. May kasabihan kami, parang pinanganak kami na merong bitsin daw sa dila. I believe there is a deeply rooted food culture in Pampanga. How did we get that culinary capital of the Philippines? So it was like been documented like, during the Spanish times that the Spanish government in Intramuros depended on the food supplied from Pampanga. The 1960s, 70s, and 80s, writers from Manila, they come here to shop in the PX black market here from Clark Air Base, and then they will eat around the area, and they will buy all this pasalubong back home. So, nakilala na to as a, so we've been written about as the gourmet province, the culinary capital, the food capital, the food heartland. Who are we to say no? Meaning, binigay yung title yon sa amin. But it's not a bragging thing. Sila yung nagpangalan sa amin, hindi kami. But I think, again, it's the confluence of affluence nga. As I mentioned earlier, that Brother Andrew Gonzalez termed, that because of all these factors put together, that shaped Pampanga cuisine. Filipino cooking is the most democratic cooking in the world, in the sense that the maker is free to interpret to whatever he wishes. At the same time, if you are presented a dish, the diner, ako na ngayon kumakain, I am even expected to adjust it to my panlasa. Meaning there's sausawan. We eat communally, always with a group. Masaya, kwentuhan. Diba? Tapos yung mga cookbooks natin, palaging good for 6, good for 10. We don't cook for one person. I've been asked many times like how to define Filipino cuisine. So I mean, for me, the best way to describe it is like a symphony of subtle, sweet, sour, salty, and maybe a bit bitter, but all in one bite. Parang pagsubo mo, nandun lahat yung flavors. So, it's a very nuanced cuisine, meaning, hindi mo talagang, if you're a foreigner, if you're not used to it, what is it? What hit me? You don't know what it is. But if you're a Filipino, sanay ka dun sa panlasa, uy, sarap ng maalat niya, yung asim niya, gumaganon. In our cuisine, we cannot talk of Filipino cuisine in general, meaning definitive, but it's very regional. And that region, where you come from, wherever you come from, will dictate or define the degree of those flavors. Like up north in the Ilocos, mas matindi yung alat ng bagoong isda. Sa Southern Tagalog, meaning Manila and Calabarzon area, is the asim. I think for me that is the advantage of why Filipino cuisine is now there, up there. Because everybody's doing their interpretation of a classic dish. Most of our dishes are named after the manner they are cooked in. The Filipino adobo is basically a cooking method using vinegar as the primary source of liquid. So, you can practically adobo anything. So, again, wala tayong fixed recipes. There is no codified recipe for anything. The only fixed recipe is free. Meaning, you're free to interpret. And again, we all know, mas masarap ang adobo the more you reheat it. Yeah. Diba? It's always best the next day. That's because the acidity of the vinegar used in the cooking has mellowed. And it has seeped in the meat. There is no right or wrong kind of adobo. The best adobo talaga, the only right, correct adobo is the adobo that you grew up with. when we eat the adobo that your grandmother cook, miski wala na sila, we eat it in their presence, in spirit. Naalala mo sila. So, in a way, pag sinaserve mo rin yan sa mga anak mo, by the time that they're grown up and married, they serve it to their children. The connection of generations continues. Para bang unbroken chain na generations are linked because of that dish. The stories behind that dish. That's what I wrote in my adobo book. Pagkain walang kwento, walang kwenta. You know, food without stories is just, well, food. When we eat together with friends, family, there's always a story on the food. That is what binds us together. Our shared experiences as children, as grandchildren, in a way, nakakataba ng puso at the same time, para bang nakaka-homesick.